Ever toss something into your online shopping cart, like completely on a whim, and then later you're like, why did I do that? Like, why do we do that to ourselves? Well, get ready to dive deep because today we are tackling those add to cart, regret later moments. We're talking all things impulse buying.
And we're going way beyond just like grabbing a candy bar at the checkout line. We're dissecting some really interesting new research coming out of Indonesia.
Ooh, Indonesia. Tell me more.
Yeah, so this is a study on young adults, specifically in the Jabodetabek region.
Jabodetabek.
Yeah, so for those who maybe haven't had the pleasure of visiting, that's the bustling Jakarta metro area.
Gotcha.
Jakarta? Yeah.
Okay, so lots of people, lots of shopping going on. What do we got to work with research-wise?
Right, so we've got excerpts from a 2023 psychology thesis.
Okay.
Dense stuff.
I bet.
But it is absolutely packed with insights about what makes us click buy now without even thinking twice.
Which most of us are guilty of at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
But before we get into all that, let's start with the basics. How do we even define impulse buying these days? Because it's not just about buying something spontaneously, right?
Right, and this thesis breaks it down really, really well. It's about that urge that you get, that irresistible urge, the complete lack of planning that goes into it. And oftentimes, the emotional roller coaster that follows. You know, the excitement, the guilt, buyer's remorse.
Oh, the guilt is so real.
The whole 9 yards, it's giving treat yourself, but then why did I treat myself?
Yes, exactly.
And you know, the study actually quotes a researcher, Rook, from way back in 1987, and he defines it as a sudden, powerful urge to buy, often driven by excitement rather than rational thought.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Sounds very familiar, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, regretted the T-shirt. But I'm curious, what's actually happening in our brains when we get hit with that urge to splurge? The research actually goes into some fascinating specifics talking about the cognitive and affective dimensions of impulse buying. You're the expert here. Break it down for us. What's actually going on?
Okay, so think of it this way. The cognitive dimension is really about the thinking, or I should say the lack of thinking that happens when you make an impulse purchase.
I like the way you think, or don't think.
It's that whole I'll figure it out later mentality.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're shopping online and you toss something in your cart, you don't even check the size or the delivery fee. You're just like, details.
Yeah, I'll deal with it later. So that's the cognitive side of things.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this particular study actually had to remove several elements that typically measure the cognitive aspects of impulse buying.
Wait, really? Why? You'd think with online shopping, there'd be tons of data on things like browsing history and abandoned carts.
You would think, right. But those measurements weren't actually statistically valid in this specific cultural context.
Interesting.
So it suggests that maybe Indonesian shoppers are a little bit more deliberate than the researchers initially thought.
Okay.
Which is very interesting. But then there's the other side of the coin, right? The affective dimension.
Yeah.
And that's where emotions really come into play.
Okay, so if cognitive is the head, affective is the heart.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm with you.
It's the thrill of the find. It's that treat yourself justification. It's that little dopamine rush when you click buy.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, let's not forget the potential for a serious case of guilt afterward, post-purchase guilt.
And the guilt can be brutal.
It's real. This study even quotes a participant. They said, I usually buy products and services based on how I feel at the time of the purchase.
Wow, talk about wearing your heart on your sleeve. Or maybe your wallet on your heart. I relate to that a little too much. But it's so true, though. Impulse buying isn't just about like a lack of willpower or something.
Right.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's really recognizing that it's both our thoughts and feelings that are at play when we shop.
It's like a symphony going on in our brains while our poor wallets are like, guys, maybe just one more bar. So we've talked about what it is, the urge, the lack of planning, the emotional fallout. Let's get into the why. What's really driving these urges?
Yeah, so the research actually breaks it down into two main categories: internal and external factors.
Internal and external. So kind of like a nature versus nurture, but for shopping?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So internal factors, think of it as those little voices in your head saying, you deserve this. Treat yourself.
Oh, I know those voices well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it could be your personality, it could be your gender, even your mood can play a huge role.
Mood, big time.
Big time. Like, you know how some people stress bake?
Mm.
Some people stress shop.
Stress shop. I feel seen.
Have you ever had like a rough day and suddenly online shopping seems like the perfect solution?
Oh, 100%. My credit card statement is basically a testament to that. So
Yeah.
retail therapy isn't just a cute saying. It's a real thing.
It's a real phenomenon for sure. For some, shopping can definitely be a way to try to cope with their emotions. And those internal triggers, they're powerful.
They are powerful.
But of course, it's not just about what's going on in our own heads.
Right.
The external world plays a huge role too.
And that's where those marketing masterminds come in, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like puppet masters pulling our purse strings with their limited time offers and influencer endorsements like, oh, I have to have that now.
You've hit the nail on the head. Those are classic external factors. Think targeted ads, the ones that seem to know exactly what you're thinking, strategically placed impulse buy items at the checkout counter, even just like the ease of online shopping.
Dangerous.
It really creates this whole environment that can really trigger those impulse buys.
Like they're playing chess with our subconscious. Okay, but this isn't all just theoretical, right? This research actually looked at real people's shopping habits.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really fascinating. So the study was done with young adults in Jabodetabek.
Okay, so we're getting a real-life glimpse into how people shop in Indonesia, which is really cool.
Exactly. And it provides a really interesting cultural perspective on this. So most of the participants were young women, mostly students, between the ages of 18 and 25. And a majority of them were shopping on Shopee, spending, get this, between RP 100,000 and RP 300,000 a week.
Wow, so they're spending a good chunk of change. And on things like fashion,
Yeah.
beauty products, food, it's like they're reading my diary. But this was a study on impulse buying, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they were spending that much on those categories. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? And it actually takes us back to those cognitive aspects we were talking about earlier. Remember how they had to kind of rework some of the ways they were measuring because some of those traditional methods weren't really translating in this cultural context?
Yeah, like maybe Indonesian shoppers are just, I don't know, more thoughtful about their purchases than the researchers initially expected.
Exactly. And it's total speculation at this point, but it could suggest that there's just something different about the way Indonesian shoppers approach online shopping in general, or maybe something about how platforms like Shopee are designed that kind of encourages more, I don't know, more intentionality.
Huh. So maybe the next time I think about just like abandoning my whole cart, I'm actually on to something. I'm just being like a super mindful shopper.
There you go.
I like it. But seriously, though, I think this research really highlights how impulse buying, it's not just a personal failing, It's not just me with no self-control. It's this whole mix of like psychology, marketing, even technology plays a part. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. We're living in this age of like one-click purchases, personalized ads. Everything's practically designed to tempt us, It's a whole other beast compared to like back in the day when you'd grab a pack of gum at the checkout line.
Okay, so true. So what can we do about it
Yeah.
besides like handing our credit cards over to someone we trust?
Yeah.
And hopefully they don't know our password.
Great. Well, honestly, that's not a terrible idea. But on a more practical level, it really comes down to self-awareness.
The self-awareness, okay?
Recognizing what your own triggers are, both internal and external. So the next time that you are about to hit that buy now button, take a breath. Ask yourself, need or want? Like, am I being swayed by a fleeting feeling here? Is it a really clever ad? Or even just the convenience of online shopping?
Yeah. It's like hitting the pause button on your brain's autopilot
Exactly.
to actually think about whether this purchase, is it something you really need? Does it fit into your budget? All of those adult things.
Exactly. Take back that control over your spending. And who knows, you might surprise yourself with how much money you actually save and how much less guilt you feel just by, just being a little bit more aware.
Less guilt, more money. That's a win-win.
Oh,
I'm here for that. Well, this has been enlightening, to say the least. Thank you so much for joining me today.
my pleasure. Happy to be here.
And to all of you listening, keep those shopping carts in check, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.